So as you know, when it comes to doing Sandbox updates, Bungie is known for taking forever. Until today. This is actually a patch note preview 2.8.1.1. States that this Wednesday, April the 29th, we're planning to release Destiny 2 Hotfix 2.8.1.1. This patch will have fix for bugs that have popped recently and also has a quick tuning pass for a weapon that's been shining a little too bright in the Crucible since Season of the Worthy began. Hard Light, a name that may either strike fear or pure joy in your heart, will be subject of today's article. Here's some notes from the team on how this weapon will be tuned come tomorrow morning. So from the dev team, Hard Light has been at the forefront due to a combination of recent adjustments to improve its usability and adjustments to auto rifles that came with patch 2.8.0. Most of the adjustments coming on Wednesday are to address its usage for mouse and keyboard users, since the ability to precisely aim regardless of range allows you to use this weapon at longer distances, on top of being able to use ricochets more effectively. Although weapons like Fighting Lion can also do what Hard Light does for the indirect fire, they are generally less effective during a direct confrontation. Hard Light boasts a lot of great stats, and its impact grows with more players using it. Eventually, no cover is safe. As such, we're reducing some of the aspects that allow for indirect fire and unexpected lethality in odd scenarios, while still retaining some of the bonuses to keep the flavor. So Hard Light will actually now have damage fall off, which now floors at 0.7 times, which is still better than the auto rifle use of 0.5 times standard. So if I'm understanding this correctly, and I just tweeted this out just to make sure, the minimum damage will drop to 0.7 of the full damage. So no longer will there be a full damage at any range. Now this is still better than the 0.5 of full damage that other auto rifles will sink to throughout its damage fall off. Now, considering what Hard Light is, stat-wise, it has a 46 range stat. Now that it's going to be subject to damage fall-off, I think it's actually going to be pretty severe here. You know, when you take things like Suros has a range stat of 60, Monty has a range stat of 55, hell, even Tommy's matchbook has a range stat of 58. Hard Light, we didn't really care what its range stat was because it had no damage fall-off. Now that it's going to be subject to damage fall-off, this is going to be a pretty significant punch to this weapon. Now, resulting in the weapon only dropping to 0.7 of its full damage versus 0.5 is like Bungie's way of balancing these two things. Considering this range stat and the fact that the zoom on this weapon is around 16, there's nothing here affecting the zoom, I'm expecting Hard Light starting tomorrow after this update goes live to start to experience damage fall off about 27 meters. Honestly, it could be less than that. Best case scenario, 27 meters. Now moving on, it's also receiving a nerf to its ricochet damage. So the ricochet damage here has actually been split between PvE and PvP. PvE, the damage still remains at 2 times the damage with those ricochet rounds. But PvP, the damage has now been reduced to only 1.35 times the damage, resulting in those moments where an enemy does sink back into cover, you won't hit them for double the damage with a random ricochet round. Which is kind of unfortunate because like some of the most satisfying kills to ever get in this game are with those ricochet rounds with Hard Light, especially if you tactically use it. The problem is that was not the case pretty much for the entirety of this Hard Light meta. A lot of people just spammed it. By the way, I do want to point out how they were able to split the damage of a single bullet in its ricochet damage between PvE and PvP. So for my people that keep saying PvE and PvP need to be separate, look right there, visible proof. There's so many of these situations between traits that perform differently in PvE and PvP. Now you got exotic perks and secondary traits also performing separately. So just know, sandboxes between PvE and PvP do perform separately. It just all comes down to Bungie and whether or not they actually make those weapons perform differently. Normally, it's easier just to go in there and be like, yo, this weapon does the same thing in PvE, PvP. It's much easier to design and balance, right? Now, moving on, the last nerf that's coming to this weapon, they also removed a hidden recoil adjustment that made the weapon more stable than intended. Honestly, I think this is a reverse to the previous change to Hard Light. So Hard Light got a lead up buff to Season of the Worthy. It actually got a stability buff where they just took away the recoil shake, right? The weapon used to vibrate so hard, I pretty much want anyone that might be potentially epileptic to not use Hard Light. But it was a very difficult weapon to control, even on PC with mouse and keyboard. 105 field of view, the weapon was still difficult to control. Then they made the adjustment though, which I was like, okay, all right. We've got an auto rifle, no damage fall off. Now you've made the recoil much more manageable. Oh, and yes, you gave us an exotic catalyst that just just gives his weapon even more stabilization. It was nice. What I did not expect was Season of the Worthy to launch with the huge auto rifle buffs that we received, dropping time to kill value here for Hard Light to 0.7 seconds, and that's 0.7 at 20 meters, 25 meters, 35 meters. It doesn't matter. The weapon doesn't have damage fall off. Due to these changes though, and the fact that Bungie is actually not waiting to like what they normally do, which is like seasonal, big, large, bulk sandbox changes, this is actually pretty incredible. And this is actually going to drastically change everything starting tomorrow. I mean, Hard Light usage, when we go over here and take a look at Burnout this past weekend in Trials, looky there, man. Hard Light has been at the top of the list over and over again. If our assumptions are correct, considering that Hard Light will now run into damage fall off, unless it's not actually going to be tied to range, but maybe Bungie might tweak it individually. We're expecting that the damage fall off will begin somewhere around 25 to 27 meters, which is going to be pretty significant, meaning weapons like Surus Regime are going to easily take its place. Summoner will definitely take its place. Gilliard, fellas, if you don't got a Gilliard, I've said it before, it's already the best auto rifle in the game. I know the Summoner is at the top of this list, but the only reason why Gilliard is not present is because a lot of people don't have it. It's a hard weapon to obtain. You got to go through forges, and it's just stacks of RNG on RNG. But I said it before that Gilliard can outperform Hard Light. Now it's definitely going to outperform it. So if you're looking for an auto rifle to replace Hard Light, you've got options. But I will say Hard Light will most definitely sink off this list. I think this is going to be a pretty significant nerf, guys, because they're undoing a lot of things. They're undoing the hidden recoil adjustment that they gave this weapon. They're also completely rewriting Hard Light's perk there with its no damage fall off. And yes, even though the weapon does hit fairly hard in this sandbox, I mean, we're talking 25.2 per crit and 15.75 per body, 0.7 optimal time to kill, 1.2 body shot time to kill. Just understand, if calculations are correct, anything north of 25 to 27 meters, you're going to start to experience damage fall off. Now, granted, crit wise, it will cap out at about 17 to 18 damage per crit, but 17 to 18 damage per crit, say just getting into the 30 meter territory, you're talking about a weapon that will now have a 1 second optimal time to kill with that 0.7 damage fall off floor. So not good for Hard Light, but I guess this is good for variety, which is what Bungie's trying to do here. Hard Light being an exotic definitely is going to make it more of a target. Understand, even though Revoker has 2.5 million kills from this past weekend, Bungie's excuse to leaving it alone is that, hey, Revoker's going to be sunset by this fall. You know, same for Mindbender, guys. Mindbender's going to be sunset before we know it. I'm not saying you can't use those weapons, but those weapons won't be able to be leveled up past this fall. Therefore, power advantage, which is so important in something like Trials or Firebender, these weapons are not going to be advantageous to bring in there, which is why you're going to see weapons like Hard Light being tacked down. I don't think Surus Regime is going to be on the list to be nerfed, even though Surus is very, very good. Surus is fantastic. I think something that kind of balances Surus out is that in its most lethal form, that spinning up form, which gives it such a good time to kill value, it has a much smaller magazine size. Normally Surus, I may get a kill or two out, but I have to be reloading immediately. Hard Light having a 49 round magazine with a 0.7 time to kill. Oh, and it can kill you behind cover. Fellas, we were just asking for this weapon to be nerfed. People would essentially just sit there and lay on the trigger with this gun without any thought to close the gap or tactical play. There really was no downsides to Hard Light in any scenario. So fellas, we'll be reviewing auto rifles again tomorrow, Hard Light especially. And I don't think I saw anything else sandbox wise that was really getting fixed outside of bugs, right? There was no adjustments other than what was seen here with Hard Light. It is possible they may throw something else into the mix, but I don't think they're going to do anything else. I mean, just taking a look at the Destiny trial report, again, there's nothing on this list I think Bungie's truly concerned about, as most of these weapons will be sunset by this fall. The only other standout weapon right now in this sandbox that's kind of close to the top of the list is, of course, Summoner. But you really can't go after Summoner, right? Like, if you go after Summoner, well, hell, you're going to have to go after Gilliard, Ether Doctor, Gnawing Hunger, Arc Logic. I mean, might as well just nerf all auto rifles again, man. So I don't see that happening. But at least starting tomorrow, Hard Light will be nerfed. And in the future, if Surus does see like a huge uptick in usage, we may see it rein back. But I don't think it needs to be, despite it being really, really good and even having a faster time to kill than other 600s due to spinning up. I feel like the magazine size on Surus really reins it in. On top of that, spinning up is still a little more difficult to control, you know? It's got a really fast rate of fire when you lay on the trigger. That thing cranks up. So it doesn't nearly have the ease of use that Hard Light has. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.